focus is going to be on the Transcontinental Railroad as well as the Homestead Act. By the 1820s, you can see that there were the 13 original colonies for the United States, and the area that the settlers moved into even while they were still under England's rule. By the early 1800s, the United States was its own country, and Thomas Jefferson made a deal with Napoleon to purchase the Louisiana area. And later, they're going to get the Oregon country area from Russia. There was a group of settlers who moved into Texas, even though it was not recognized by the United States at that time. The later area of Spanish possessions will be taken over after the Mexican War when James K. Polk is president, and he is going to help fulfill the concept of manifest destiny. And that's going to be one of our 4 factors that are going to cause people to move west. The first one, manifest destiny, is all about it is the American right to own everything from the Atlantic to Pacific Ocean. It's our job to spread democracy and freedom and Christianity to the people who live on that territory across the continent. One of the things that's going to help get things moving is going to be the gold rush. People had kind of trickled in and out through the American West, but nobody really just took off and left until about this point. The gold rush in California is going to cause a lot of single men to go strike it rich. That was their dream. The first groups that get there, they do make a lot of money on the gold rush, but it really becomes the people who set up stores and sell the goods you need to mine for the gold. But this is going to be your single guys moving west. The second is the Homestead Act, happened in 1862, and yes, the Civil War was still going on, but the United States government is going to encourage people to move west. They're going to give families, or people who get a claim, 160 acres of free land, and if you live on it for 5 years and make improvements, it's yours. But it's a first come, like there was an area in Oklahoma where they raced for it. There's going to be other public lands sold, but the big focus is just getting that free land, which prior to this, you really had to have money in order to own something. So this is going to bring families out west and a large group of people. Now, there were only a few ways to get west. One was a boat, and you could get on a boat, and it took about 6 months, and you would go all the way down to the end of South America and come all the way up into California, and it was very expensive, but this was a more safe route compared to the other way, which was land. When you went down the Oregon Trail, it was over 2,000 miles long, and it would depend on when you left for how long that it would take, but it was very dangerous because you had to deal with the elements as well as the natives who lived in the area. If you look at the Oregon Trail, you would go across the flat, dusty land, and then you would hit the Rocky Mountain region, and you had to make it through the Rocky Mountain region by a certain time or the snow would trap you. And then you would carry on across the Platte up into the western side of the United States. The Donner Party left at the wrong time, and they ended up stuck in the mountains, and a great majority of them died, and those who survived told scary stories of how the only thing they had to eat were the other people there. One of the things that's really going to help people move west is the railroad. Prior to the Civil War, the railroads were not connected very well. They were different widths, and that's one of the reasons why the South had a hard time moving equipment. Now, the North had been an industry area, and they had kind of made transportation a focus. But there was no railroad out west. And so they're going to start deciding how to get there. And there's going to be smaller railroads laid, and then they're going to have the big one, the Transcontinental Railroad. The United States government is going to kind of give a grant to whoever can build the first railroad that will reach from the east to the west. And 2 main groups are going to do it. You've got the Union Pacific Railroad, and they're going to lay tracks from Omaha, Nebraska to California. And the Central Pacific is going to start in Sacramento and move to Omaha. Now, the deal was whoever got there first would make all the money. But the Union Pacific is going to be going across flat land, and they're going to use a lot of former Confederates and freed slaves. The Central Pacific is going to have to go through the mountains, and that is going to cause them to take a little bit longer, and a lot of Asian immigrants will come in. A lot of Chinese laborers will work on the Central Pacific Railroad. They finally get joined together on May 10th in 1869 at Promontory Point, Utah. It would only take you now 4 to 5 days to go from one end to the other end of the country, and it is a great architectural achievement. Now, this would fulfill the whole entire concept of manifest destiny. Now, anybody could get out there if they so chose to get there. The two railroads decided to meet at Promontory Point, Utah, because it was getting very expensive. People were getting in trouble with mishandling money, and it was time to just finish the railroad and move on. As you can see, this is where it's going to go, and that's where they're going to join. You see that this side laid a whole lot more than this side, but remember, these guys had to go through the mountains. Here is another picture. This is where they joined the two groups. You can see each side, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific, where they met, and they're going to hammer spikes, one silver and one gold, into the ground to represent the joining of the two railroads. Now, the railroad itself caused a lot of improvements. They're going to standardize the track. They're going to use steel instead of iron, so it withholds a lot of abuse. They're going to decide, like, this signal means this no matter where you are. They're going to develop air brakes. One of the biggest things to me was the time zones. Used to, people would have clocks in their houses, and they would just set the time for their area. And because they didn't travel much, you just went by that clock, like a grandfather clock or a mantle clock. But once the railroad starts happening, you've got to know what time to get on your train so you don't miss it and you can't be late. So then they're going to develop pocket watches. They also called them railroad watches. So everybody began keeping up with the same time. So if it was 10 o'clock in New York, it would be 9 o'clock in Nashville, and it would be 8 o'clock in, let's say, Utah, and then it would be 7 o'clock in Sacramento. And those were the time zones that were established, which we still use today. Now, the railroad's impact and how it's going to change that is goods are going to get from one end to the other, and it's going to be a whole lot cheaper. And those goods include people. If you look before the Transcontinental Railroad, it was $3.45 to ship a barrel of flour, but afterwards it's only 68 cents. The Irish and the Chinese are going to be able to have new jobs working on the railroad, and it's going to be safer. One of the negative impacts is going to be the Native American removal and the wars that were fought during that time.